Fear the Pale Blue What We Left Ourselves Episode 6. Position the device wakes at 6:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3 months and 11 days after the read-in, though Renn stopped counting the second number on purpose and only knows it because her body still tracks time in blocks of days since a variable changed. That's the ICD in her. 15 years of it doesn't come out because someone showed her the truth once and told her to keep working. She's at the kitchen window when it happens. Coffee gone cold in a mug that says nothing. Watching a squirrel work a low branch of the oak in the rear courtyard like the tree owes it something. The window is old, single pane, and it rattles faintly whenever a truck comes down 30th Street, which it does now, and the rattle covers most of the first tone. 3 months and 11 days is long enough to build a shape around a silence, and she's built one. Most mornings look like this one. Coffee, the window, the squirrel or whatever's replaced it that week, the drawer across the room that she doesn't open unless she has to and hasn't closed since the day it mattered. The watching place doesn't announce itself at 6:14 in the morning. It sits under the coffee and the window, and the squirrel the way a foundation sits under a house, doing its work without asking to be noticed. And most days she can go an hour, sometimes 2, before something reminds her it's there. The Tier 5 mapping, the Portland asset whose file she still hasn't touched, the Echo's 2 words folded in 5 days now and not yet acted on, none of it announces itself either. It's just present, the way weight is present in a hand that stopped noticing it's carrying something. The second tone she catches. Low, flat, not a ring exactly, closer to a struck glass a room away. It comes from the drawer in the front hall table, the one that stayed open since the day the old man walked her through the read-in room and showed her, at the end, what this particular channel sounds like when it opens. She hadn't expected to hear it again, and hadn't expected not to. No reason to hurry for a summons that's already arrived. The device is small and gray, the kind of object that looks like nothing if you don't know what it is. No screen, no keys, just a strip of light along one edge that's gone from dark to a dull amber. She picks it up. The tone sounds a third time and stops. That's the whole message. 3 tones in silence, the same pattern the old man ran for her in the facility 3 months ago, standing at the far end of the table with his hands loose at his sides, saying, "Watch." This is what it sounds like when it isn't a request. Renn sets the device back in the drawer and closes it for the first time since the read-in, then opens it again a second later and takes the device out and puts it in her coat pocket instead. For no reason she examines. A shower, then the clothes she'd wear to a funeral for someone she didn't know well, dark, unremarkable, nothing that photographs. She checks the inside left pocket of her jacket before she puts it on, feels the stiff rectangle of the photograph through the lining without taking it out. And that's a habit now, not a decision. The same motion every time she leaves this apartment for longer than an hour. At the door, she stops with her hand already on the knob and takes her phone out of her back pocket, thumbs it open to a contact she hasn't spoken to since before the read-in, an old handler reassigned to a desk job 2 years back, and holds it there long enough for the screen to dim once before she locks it and puts it away again. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't have made things worse for both of them. She knows that even now. A moth has died on the windowsill sometime in the night, small and gray, wings folded wrong. She flicks it out through the crack in the window with one finger before she leaves, an automatic gesture that has nothing to do with anything, and stands a moment longer than the gesture requires, looking at the empty sill like it owes her a reading on the rest of the day. It doesn't. She goes down the stairs. The stairwell smells the way it always does at this hour, old carpet and the ghost of somebody's breakfast 2 floors up, bacon most likely, and a window at the landing that Walt props open in summer with a paint can nobody's ever moved. Walt isn't at his desk yet, too early even for him, so the lobby is empty, and she lets herself out into a morning that's already warm, already smelling of cut grass from someone's yard on the next block. A sprinkler ticks somewhere out of sight. A jogger passes on the far sidewalk, earbuds in, not looking at her, which is the way she prefers every stranger she'll ever pass. Outside, a car is idling at the curb that doesn't belong to the neighborhood, plain, dark, a driver she doesn't recognize and won't ask the name of. He doesn't get out to open her door. She wouldn't have wanted him to. Level 0 doesn't route through the Tier 5 architecture that manages her assignments. That much she has known since the read-in. A summons like this isn't a suggestion. Level 0 doesn't route through the Tier 5 architecture that manages her assignments, doesn't touch the analysts or the case officers or any of the machinery she's spent 15 years inside of. It comes direct, the way the old man's voice came direct in that room below the Nevada desert, past every layer of the ICD that exists to keep people like her from ever hearing anything unfiltered. Sitting across from him that day, she understood. If this channel ever opened again, it would mean he wanted something from her personally, and that whatever it was, she would not be given the option to say no in any form that counted. She gets in the car. The driver pulls away from the curb without a word, and Georgetown slides past the window, brick and ivy and a man walking a dog too big for him. And she watches all of it the way she watches everything now, since the read-in, since the echo, cataloging without deciding yet what any of it means. A city bus pulls away from a stop 2 blocks down, mostly empty at this hour, and a woman in scrubs waits at the next corner for a light that takes its time changing. None of it is anything. She notices it anyway, the whole ordinary machinery of a city getting up in the morning without any idea what's moving through it in a plain, dark car, and some part of her, small and unimportant, envies every one of them for that. The route takes them down Wisconsin Avenue before it cuts east, past shuttered shop windows that won't open for another 2 hours, past a coffee cart setting up outside the library branch, past the turn for Key Bridge that the driver doesn't take. She doesn't ask where they are going. The shape of it she already knows, the way she's known things about this program for 15 years, absorbed rather than told. The route recognizable from having taken versions of it before without ever once being briefed on where it led. The car takes her to Joint Base Andrews, not Dulles, not Reagan, and the aircraft waiting on the tarmac has no markings she can read from 50 yards and no markings, she assumes, that would mean anything to her from 5. A Gulf Stream, gray on gray, engines already turning over. No manifest is read to her. No one checks anything. She climbs the short stairway and the door seals behind her before she's fully seated, and the plane is moving within 4 minutes of her boarding it, which tells her more about who authorized this trip than anything anyone could have said. Inside, the cabin holds 8 seats, and she's the only one in any of them. No flight attendant, no safety briefing, just a laminated card tucked into the seat pocket that she doesn't read because she already knows where the exits are on an aircraft like this one, has known since a training rotation a decade ago she doesn't think about most days. A carafe of coffee sits in a holder by the window, untouched, gone cold before they've cleared the Blue Ridge. She doesn't drink it, doesn't know why it's there. Sleep doesn't come on this flight. She doesn't try for it. Instead, she sits with the window shade half up, watching the country turn brown beneath her the farther west they go, and she thinks about the ask that's been sitting in the watching place for 5 days now, unreported, unrefused. The echo's 2 words folded in beside everything else she carries and doesn't put down. Go. Be present. She hasn't gone anywhere yet, hasn't done anything the ICD would call action, but she's held the channel open, and holding it open was the only answer she gave. And some part of her has known since the moment she did it that the not answering was itself a kind of yes. The plane starts down before she's ready for it to. The way descents always arrive faster than the mind expects, and out the window the ground resolves from a haze of brown into something with edges. Dry lake beds like pale coins pressed into the earth. A highway cutting straight through nothing for miles at a stretch. Heat already lifting off the asphalt in visible sheets, though it isn't yet 9 in the morning local time. They land at a strip with no terminal, just a hangar and a windsock and a second car waiting with its engine running. And this driver doesn't speak either, and Renn doesn't expect him to. The heat hits her the moment the door opens, before her foot even finds the stairway, a wall of it that the plane's air conditioning did nothing to prepare her for, and she stands on the tarmac for a second longer than necessary just to let her body register the difference. Somewhere behind the hangar a generator runs, steady and low, the only sound out here besides the wind moving through nothing in particular. The desert north of Las Vegas in July has a smell she remembers from the Renn trip, dust and creosote and something mineral underneath it. and the heat comes through the car's air conditioning anyway, pressing at the windows like it's owed entry. US 95 runs north past Indian Springs, past a gas station with 3 pumps and a hand-painted sign advertising jerky, past Joshua trees that thin out and vanish the farther they go, until there's only creosote scrub and the pale floor of a lakebed shimmering off to the east. Mount Charleston sits behind them in the mirror, its peak still holding a smear of old snow even in July. And then a fence line appears where there was nothing before it, chain link and barbed wire, and a sign that says nothing at all, which says plenty on its own. A hawk works a thermal off to the west, wings barely moving, and Renn watches it for as long as the road allows before a rise in the land takes it out of sight. Radio silence in the car, not enforced, just understood, the same way the silence was understood on the drive out 3 months ago. Heat shimmer stands up off the blacktop in long, wavering columns that make the horizon look liquid, and twice she watches something that isn't there resolve, at the last second into nothing at all, a trick of the light the desert seems to specialize in. A cattle guard rattles under the tires twice, 10 minutes apart, though there's no fence line to explain either one. Just the metal grate and then scrub again on both sides. The dashboard reads 104 by the time the fence line comes into view, the number climbing a degree every few minutes, though worry isn't something this stretch of road has ever asked of her before. The car doesn't stop at the fence. Someone opens it before they arrive, and Renn doesn't see who. The last 20 minutes of the drive go to the thing she's learned to do with waiting, which is not waiting exactly, more a controlled occupation of the time, running over what she knows about the old man, finding it thinner than she'd like. In the program since before 1977, though nobody has ever told her the exact year, not even during the read-in, when he told her more than anyone had told her in 15 years, and still left gaps she'd noticed and not asked about. He saw 1988 arrive and pass without whatever the ICD had built toward it happening the way it was supposed to. The read-in conducted personally, which she now understands was not standard procedure, was in fact the first time in the history of the program that level 0 contact had touched an active field operative directly. Not once since, as far as she knows, has he done it again. Until this morning. Last time, he told her 5 things and let her sit with the weight of each one before moving to the next. This time, she doesn't know what he wants, only that wanting is new. The old man has spent 5 decades on the receiving end of everything the program produces, watching, she assumes, more than he's ever been asked to act. If he's decided to ask her for something now, it isn't small, and it isn't procedural, and it likely isn't something the machine she still technically works for is meant to hear about at all. The unmarked turnoff comes without warning, gravel giving way to a paved lane so recently laid it still smells faintly of tar, and the car follows it toward a low concrete structure that could be a maintenance shed for a power substation, could be nothing, could be exactly what it is. The structure has one door and no windows, and the technician waiting inside it is the same one from 3 months ago, or close enough to it that Renn doesn't bother checking. A woman somewhere past 50 with a laminated badge clipped upside down on purpose. A habit Renn noticed the first time and never asked about. No words pass between them beyond a nod. The technician runs a wand over her once, more ritual than search, and keys a code into a panel Renn's never seen the full sequence of, and the far wall, which isn't a wall, slides open onto the elevator car. The elevator is the same one from 3 months ago, narrow enough that she and the technician stand closer together than either of them would choose, and it takes 11 minutes to reach the bottom. The numbers on the panel counting down past 100 and then past 200 feet, not floors. Her ears pop twice on the way down, and she swallows against it both times without thinking. There's a window in the car, reinforced glass no wider than her hand, and through it the rock goes by in bands, tan and rust and a deep gray-black that the technician once told her on the first trip was almost 2 billion years old. She doesn't ask this time, just watches the strata slide upward the way she watched the country slide past the plane window, cataloging, filing nothing. Neither of them speaks for the full 11 minutes. The only sound is the cable somewhere above them, a low mechanical groan every few seconds that the technician doesn't react to, and Renn has learned not to either. The air at the bottom has no quality to it at all. Recycled 76 years now by her count, stripped by whatever system keeps this place breathable of every trace of what air is supposed to carry. No cold, no damp, no mineral edge from the rock 200 feet up, nothing. It's the kind of nothing a lung notices even when a mind has stopped expecting anything else. The corridor is the corridor from before, low ceiling, floor tile the color of an old dime, and the door at the end of it opens onto the same room. Composite paneling from 1948, institutional gray gone grayer with age, built to absorb sound and light both, so the room holds itself still around anyone standing in it. Same table. Its surface is worn pale in two long ovals where forearms have rested on it for most of a century. The light overhead runs slightly warm, an amber cast that does nothing for the gray of everything else, and there are still no windows, because 200 feet down there is nothing a window could show. The old man is already seated when she comes in, hands flat on the table in front of him, the posture she remembers from 3 months ago. A man arranged the way a man arranges himself when the arranging is close to finished. He doesn't stand, doesn't offer his hand, just watches her cross the room and take the chair across from him, the same chair. And for a moment neither of them says anything at all, which tells her something on its own, given who he is and how little of anyone's time he's ever wasted. The chair scrapes once against the floor tile when she pulls it out, a small ugly sound in a room built to swallow sound, and she notices him notice it, a flicker of something at the corner of his mouth that isn't quite a reaction to anything she's done. She sits. Her spine finds the same posture it found 3 months ago without her choosing it. Shoulders back, hands loose in her lap, the posture of someone who has spent 15 years being watched and has stopped minding it. Last time she sat in this chair and he told her things. 5 of them in order, each one landing before the next began, and she'd left this room a different operative than she'd walked in as. This time the chairs haven't moved and the table hasn't moved and the light is exactly as warm as it was, but something in the room has turned over. He's going to ask her something. She can feel the shape of it before he speaks, the way she used to feel a surveillance subject's attention shift before they turn to look at her, some pressure in the air that arrives ahead of the event it's attached to. A metal pitcher sits at the far end of the table, sweating faintly in the room's flat air, 2 glasses turned upside down beside it that neither of them will touch. She notices, distantly, that there are 2, exactly 2, and has no idea why she counts them. "You held the channel," the old man says, and it isn't a question, and it takes her a full second to understand he isn't talking about the summons device or anything from this morning. 5 days ago. The echo. Renn doesn't answer right away. She looks at his hands flat on the table, the skin loose over the knuckles, a faint tremor in the left one that wasn't there 3 months ago or that she didn't notice 3 months ago. She isn't sure which. "I don't know what you mean," she says, which is a lie of a particular kind, the kind that isn't meant to be believed, only acknowledged as the opening move it is. "You do." He doesn't raise his voice. He's never raised his voice in front of her, not once, and she understands somewhere under the surface of her attention that a man who's spent 50 years in this program learned a long time ago that volume is a tool for people who don't have better ones. "I'm not asking you to confirm it for the record. There is no record. I'm asking because I need you to understand that I already know, and that what I'm about to ask you has nothing to do with the ICD finding out, because the ICD is never going to find out. Not from me." She lets that sit. Outside the room, 76 years of recycled air do nothing, produce no draft, carry no sound. "Then how?" she says. "I've had access to things you haven't," he says, "longer than you've been alive. I don't need a file to know what's in front of me. I've watched enough operatives come through this program to recognize the weight of someone carrying something they haven't reported, and I watched you walk in here 3 months ago already carrying more than you should have been able to carry. And I have spent the time since then paying attention to what changes in a person like that." He pauses, and his eyes move once briefly to the middle button of her jacket, not lower, not higher, and she doesn't know if that's the pocket or if she's imagining it is, and he says nothing else about it, and the moment passes. "What do you want?" she says. He tells her. She doesn't move while he talks, hands gone flat in her own lap without her noticing. A mirror of his she won't recognize she's made until she's back on the plane. Somewhere behind her sternum something tightens, a door closing quietly in another room of a house she thought was empty. He wants what she recovers, whatever it turns out to be, whenever the recovery happens, brought to him first, personally, before it enters the ICD's channels in any form, before a report gets filed, before an analyst's hands touch it, before it becomes an entry in a database that some future director 3 administrations from now can requisition with the right clearance and the wrong intentions. He wants it to come to him, outside the machine, and he wants her to be the one who brings it. Why? She says, and the word comes out flatter than she means it to, though she doesn't try again to soften it. Because I've spent 50 years watching what the machine does with things it doesn't understand, he says. It files them. It contains them. A committee gets built around them, and the committee builds a protocol, and the protocol survives every person who understood the original reason for it, until what's left is a box with the right label on it, and nobody inside the institution who remembers what's actually in the box. He stops, and for the first time since she sat down, something crosses his face that isn't quite readable, gone before she can name it. I watched what it did with 1988, watched it from inside the room. I know exactly how an organization decides what a thing means when the thing itself refuses to mean only one thing. It picks the meaning that's easiest to administer, every time, without exception in 50 years without exception. And you think this is different. I know this is different. His hands haven't moved on the table, but something in his voice has dropped a register, close enough to private that she leans forward without deciding to. I've reached my own conclusions about what's coming, Renn. I'm not going to lay them out for you today, because you don't need all of it to understand what I'm asking, and because some of what I believe I'm not fully certain of myself, not enough to hand it to someone else as fact. But I've had 50 years to sit with this, and I've concluded that when the moment arrives, the correct response is not going to come from a machine built to protect a continuity it no longer remembers the purpose of. It's going to come from a person. One person, standing in the right place, holding the thing itself, making a choice the machine was never built to make. He says it plainly, the way he says most things, but something underneath it isn't plain at all, and for a moment the age in his face looks less like age and more like erosion, the wearing down of a thing that's been rained on for 50 years without shelter. It passes. His hands stay flat on the table the whole time, and neither of them mentions it. And you've decided that's me. I've decided that's you, he says without apology, without warmth either, a simple statement of a conclusion he arrived at the way he arrives at everything, slowly and completely. Not because I like you. I don't dislike you, but that's not the basis for it. I've watched what you've done since the read-in, the Tier 5 mapping, the Portland asset, none of it filed, all of it held the way you're holding the echoes ask right now, the way you held it the moment you decided not to refuse. You are, of everyone in this program, the person who has demonstrated the exact capacity I need, which is the capacity to carry something the machine wants and not give it to the machine. She lets the silence stretch after that, watching the tremor in his left hand where it rests against the table's worn surface. And she wonders, not for the first time this conversation, exactly how far his knowledge of her extends. Whether it's the mapping and the asset and the ask, 3 discrete facts assembled into a profile, or whether it goes further than that, into places she's never let anyone else see the edges of. She doesn't ask. Some questions answer themselves the moment you ask them, and this is one she isn't ready to have answered either way. Something in her goes still at that, a stillness with a name she doesn't say. You're describing Healy, she says. The old man's mouth moves, not quite a smile. Healy is doing what I'm doing. On a scale so much smaller it's barely worth the comparison, and for reasons so much smaller they don't survive contact with what I've spent my life inside of. But yes, structurally, I'm asking you to be an instrument pointed at a private conclusion the same as he is. I won't pretend otherwise to make this easier for either of us. Does he know, she says, Healy, does he know there's a version of him sitting in a room like this? No. A pause, longer than the ones before it. And you're not going to tell him. She isn't. She already knows that, and she doesn't like how quickly she knew it. That's not reassuring. I didn't offer it as reassurance. What happens to me, she says. After what? After I hand you something and the ICD eventually notices its own operation came back short, after somebody asks where the rest of it went, the old man considers that with the same unhurried attention he's given everything else in the room. I don't know, he says, and it's the first time in the conversation he's admitted not knowing something. I'd like to tell you I've planned for that, but I haven't. 50 years and I never once got past the part where the thing itself arrives. Everything after that has always been someone else's problem to solve, and I'm aware that someone is about to be you. That's an honest answer. It's the only kind I have left in me. She sits with that. The overhead light hums faint, a sound she hadn't noticed until now and can't stop noticing once she has. The echo asked me to carry something back to them, she says, watching his face for whatever it does with that piece of information offered now for the first time out loud in any room to anyone. Or to act on it. They didn't specify which. You're asking for something that isn't that. I'm aware, he says, and there's no surprise in it at all, which tells her he already knew, has known since before she walked in, has perhaps known since the moment the ask arrived on her clearance 5 days ago. I'm not asking you to choose me over them. I'm asking you to bring it to me first. What happens after that is yours to work out, and I mean that. I'm not trying to take this away from whatever they intend for you. I'm trying to keep it away from an institution that will file it and lose it inside its own procedures before either you or they ever get the chance to decide anything at all. And the ICD. The ICD believes the recovery, whenever it happens, is theirs. An operation, logged, reported, processed through channels that exist specifically so that no single person ever holds something like this alone. He looks at his own hands for a moment, the tremor in the left one just visible in the warm light. They're not wrong that it's dangerous for one person to hold something like this alone. They're only wrong about which danger matters more. They'd assign it a designation, Renn says. Something bloodless, a case number. Somebody in records 3 floors below anyone who matters would file it next to weather balloon debris and interstate fraud. Yes, the old man's mouth does something that isn't a smile but sits in the same neighborhood as one. That's exactly what would happen. That's the whole of my argument if you want it reduced to a sentence. And once it's yours, she says, once I've brought it to you instead of them, what then? Then it's mine to decide what happens next, and I'll decide it the way I've decided everything else in 50 years slowly, and probably wrong at least once before I get it right. He doesn't offer more than that. And something in the way he says it tells her more isn't coming no matter how she asks. Renn doesn't say anything for a while. The photograph in the inside left pocket of her jacket registers the way it always does when she's sitting still long enough to notice her own body, a weight so small it shouldn't. She doesn't take it out, doesn't look down. No telling if he knows it's there, whether his eyes moved to that button a moment ago because he does know or because old men's eyes wander, and she decides in the silence not to ask because asking would answer it just the same. You understand what you're asking me to become, she says finally. 3 parties, 3 claims on the same thing. I can't give it to all of you. No, the old man agrees. You can't. That doesn't concern you. It concerns me a great deal. His voice doesn't change, but something behind it does. Some pressure she can't locate a source for. I'm 78 years old, and I have spent every one of the last 50 inside a program that has never once, in my experience, produced a clean outcome for the person standing closest to the decision. I am not offering you a clean outcome either. Only the one version of this, I believe, gives the thing itself a chance of landing somewhere that isn't a filing cabinet 3 administrations deep in a building nobody outside this program has ever heard of. And if I say no, you won't, he says, not unkindly, and the absence of unkindness in it lands worse than cruelty would have. Not because I'd force you. I have no leverage over you that the ICD doesn't already have, and using theirs would defeat the purpose of asking you instead of ordering you. You won't say no because saying no requires an explanation, and the only true explanation involves telling me about a conversation you've already decided not to report to anyone, including me, including the people who are supposed to be your chain of command. You're already boxed in, Renn, boxed in before you ever walked into this room. I'm not the one who did that to you. I'm only the 3rd person to notice. She doesn't answer that directly. She looks at the table between them, the two pale ovals worn into the surface by decades of forearms, his and whoever sat across from him before her, and further back than that, other pairs of hands in other configurations she'll never know about. "What do I call this?" she says. "If I do it." "You don't call it anything," he says. "That's rather the point." "How would I even reach you?" she says. "If it happens in the field, if there's no time to think about what to call it." "You'll know," he says, which isn't an answer, and they both let it sit as one anyway. She starts to say something back and doesn't finish it, and he doesn't ask her to. The silence after that runs longer than any that's come before it in the conversation, long enough that the hum of the overhead light becomes the only thing in the room with any motion to it at all. Renn doesn't nod. She doesn't say yes. What she does is look at him for 3 full seconds, longer than she's looked at anyone since the read-in. A look that isn't asking anything and isn't refusing anything, and something in his face settles. The settling of a man who has just watched a conclusion arrive that he expected and did not need spoken aloud to consider confirmed. "All right," he says, and it isn't clear which of them the words are addressed to. She stands when he stands, which happens without either of them announcing it, some shared understanding that the room has produced what it was going to produce. He doesn't offer his hand this time either, just stays where he is, hands still flat on the table, and watches her the way he watched her cross the room an hour ago, unhurried, cataloging something she can't guess the shape of. At the door she stops, half-turned, and says the only thing left in her that hasn't already been said in some other form. "You didn't tell me what you think it is, what we're going to find." "No," he says, "I didn't." She waits a beat longer in case he means to add something, and he doesn't, and she goes. The corridor takes her back the way she came, the same low ceiling, the same tile the color of an old dime, and the elevator carries her up through 200 feet of banded rock. She doesn't look at this time, because she's already looking at something else, something with no surface to catch light on at all. The same technician waits at the top, and this time there's a question in the woman's face that she doesn't ask out loud. Some professional instinct that reads Renn's posture the way Walt reads the building's tenants, and whatever she sees, she keeps it to herself and simply keys the door back open onto the surface structure without a word. Renn is grateful for that too. In the same unexamined way, she was grateful for the driver's silence on the way out. Outside the surface structure, the heat has climbed further still, thick enough now that the concrete itself seems to breathe with it, and Renn stands a moment before the car door opens for her, letting it settle into her skin the way she let the cold settle into her lungs 200 feet down. By the time the car comes back through the gate, the desert has turned, the sun dropping toward Charleston's snow-smeared peak and throwing the creosote scrub into long blue shadow, and the heat that pressed against the windows on the way in has thinned into something almost bearable, though the dashboard display still reads 101. The driver doesn't speak on the return leg any more than he did on the way out, and some part of Renn is grateful for it. A gratitude she doesn't examine closely, because what she's doing in the passenger seat isn't thinking. Not exactly, more a slow settling of weight into a shape it hasn't held before. Her hands ache faintly from being still too long, the stiffness that comes from holding a posture without letting it move, and she flexes her fingers once against her knee without deciding to. The same motion she used to make coming out of long surveillance sits 15 years ago. A body memory older than anything from this morning. 3 claims. The ICT, which believes the recovery is an operation, filed and reported and owned by the institution the way it owns every operative who's ever worked inside it. Then the Echo, who asked her, outside any channel the program has ever built, to be present and to carry back whatever being present gives her. The old man, who asked from further inside the machine than anyone she's ever met and against it at the same time. A man who has spent 5 decades deciding the machine can't be trusted with the one thing it's built entirely to receive. She can't honor all 3, understood that in the room, sitting across from him, before he'd finished the sentence that made the shape of it clear. What she didn't understand until the desert started sliding past the window again, the light going gold and then rust, and then a deep unlit blue along the horizon, was that she'd already accepted all 3 anyway, not through agreement, Through the accumulation of every moment in which refusing one of them would have cost her something she wasn't willing to pay, disclosure, exposure, the collapse of a silence she's built her whole remaining usefulness around. Each refusal had a price. She'd paid none of them. The unpaid prices don't disappear. They just move downstream to a day she can't see yet, when the thing itself is in her hands and all three of them are standing with their palms out at the same time. There's no single moment she can point to and call the turn. She's already standing on a floor she doesn't remember choosing, and by the time she notices the ground has changed under her, standing anywhere else isn't an option anymore. A jackrabbit breaks from the scrub near the shoulder, and the driver doesn't slow for it and doesn't hit it either, and Renn watches it go, ears flat, gone into the creosote before she's finished registering it was there, and she thinks, with no warning and no obvious connection to anything, of her mother's kitchen radio, a specific model with a cracked dial that stopped working on the 8s, and she has no idea why that arrives now in this car in this desert, and she lets it pass through her without chasing it down. The light keeps dropping while she isn't watching it, the way desert light always seems to, all at once after being nowhere for an hour. And by the time the hangar comes into view, the sky above Charleston has gone the color of a healing bruise, purple shading to yellow low along the ridge line. The one thing she doesn't resolve, the thing she turns over without finishing, is whether the old man asked her because he'd already decided she would say yes regardless of what he offered as reasoning, or whether the reasoning itself was built for her specifically, tailored to a shape he'd studied longer than she'd known she was being studied. She can't get underneath that question before the airstrip appears again, the hangar and the windsock, and the plane is turning its engines over before she's fully out of the car. The flight east runs dark most of the way, the country beneath her gone from brown to black, to a scatter of lights that could be any city, until a shape in the window tells her it's Denver. Then nothing again for a long stretch. Then the eastern seaboard's dense, unbroken glow, arriving all at once the way it always does after so much empty ground. Sleep doesn't come on this flight either. She watches the lights instead, and somewhere over Ohio she catches herself running her thumb along the seam of her jacket pocket, feeling for the photograph without deciding to, and she stops herself and folds her hands instead, and neither motion tells her anything the other one didn't. They touch down at Andrews a little after 10, the base quiet at this hour, just security lights and the distant sound of another aircraft somewhere on approach. No one meets her on the tarmac this time. The same plain car is waiting anyway, a different driver, and the drive into the city is short enough that she barely settles into the seat before Georgetown's narrow streets replace the base's wide, empty ones. It's past 11 when the second car drops her at the corner of 30th Street, the streetlight throwing its cone down over wet pavement from a sprinkler system, 2 doors down that's still running on a timer nobody's adjusted for the season. The oak in the courtyard is a black shape against a sky that's gone past navy into something closer to nothing, and the building's front door sticks the way it always does in summer humidity, and she has to put her shoulder into it, which she does without thinking, an old habit from 100 nights like this one. Walt is not at his desk. He's in the stairwell on the second floor landing, a folding ladder set up under a light fixture that's been flickering for a week, and he's got his reading glasses pushed up onto his forehead where they always end up, and a screwdriver in one hand and the cover plate of the fixture in the other, and he doesn't hear her on the stairs until she's nearly level with him. The bad fixture throws intermittent shadows across the landing wall, catching and losing him in turns, and for a second before he notices her, the light stalls him in a stretch of gray, unmoving air that makes him look, briefly, like something posed rather than standing. Then the bulb steadies and he's just Walt again, glasses pushed up, screwdriver working at the stripped screw. "Evening," he says, not looking down right away, working the screwdriver into a stripped screw with the patience of a man who has fixed 1,000 things exactly like this one. "Didn't figure you for a late one tonight." He says it the way he says most things to her, which is to say without any real expectation of an answer, a comment offered into the air more than directed at a person. His thermos sits on the second step below him, cap off, steam long gone from whatever was in it hours ago. "Radio says it's supposed to break 100 tomorrow," he says, to the fixture more than to her, and she makes a sound that isn't quite agreement and isn't quite anything else, and he doesn't seem to need more than that. "Long day," she says, which is true in every sense that matters and none that she could explain. He looks at her then, finally, and something in his face does a small thing she's never seen it do before, a loosening or maybe a tightening. She can't decide which and doesn't reach for either word. 28 years in this building has given Walt an instrument for reading the people who live in it. Not intrusive, never a question asked out loud, just a low, steady attention that clocks who's sleeping and who isn't, who's eating and who's stopped, who comes home at 11 p.m., carrying something they didn't leave with that morning. He's noticed things about her before and never said a word, but his shoulders do something small and involuntary, a slight settling back against the ladder's frame, and his eyes hold hers half a second longer than an evening exchange requires, and then he looks back at the screw in the fixture and says, "This one's about had it. Might just replace the whole housing." She could climb the 2 more flights to her own door without another word passing between them, and most nights that's exactly what happens. Tonight she doesn't move right away. She watches him set the cover plate down on the step below him, watches the deliberate care of a man whose knee has taught him to do everything slowly now, and some small unfamiliar impulse in her, one she doesn't examine, wants to stay in the stairwell a moment longer than the moment requires. "Let me know if you need anything," she says, which she has never once said to him in 3 years in this building, and the strangeness of it lands on both of them at the same time, a beat of silence in the stairwell that neither fills. "Will do," he says, and goes back to the screw, and she goes up. The apartment is dark when she lets herself in, and she doesn't turn on the overhead light, just the small lamp by the window, and she stands for a moment in the kitchen doorway looking at the rear courtyard through the glass, the oak, the sprinkler still hissing faintly 2 doors down, the same view from this morning turned inside out by the hour. She takes off the jacket and hangs it on the hook by the door, and the photograph shifts once inside the pocket with a small paper sound she's memorized the shape of, and she doesn't take it out. Nothing to eat, though she hasn't eaten since a vending machine sandwich at the airstrip, that morning, plastic wrap squeaking against her fingers the whole time she ate it standing up. The refrigerator hums behind her when she passes it, the same tired compressor sound it's made since she moved in, and she doesn't open it. In the bathroom, she runs the tap cold and holds her wrists under it longer than the temperature requires, an old habit from academy days meant to reset a body that doesn't know the difference between a desert facility and a bathroom sink in Georgetown. Her face in the mirror looks the way it always looks after a day like this one. Dry hands. Tap off. She sits in the chair by the window without turning on the lamp any brighter than it already is. The drawer across the room, the one that's been open since the read-in, catches a slice of streetlight along its edge. 46. It hasn't moved in 5 months, and it doesn't move tonight either. She remembers, without wanting to, the exact moment 3 months ago when this room's ordinary furniture stopped being ordinary, when the drawer went from a place she kept spare keys to a place she couldn't bring herself to close. The read-in didn't rearrange the apartment. It only asked the apartment to hold something it was never built for, the same request the old man made of her this afternoon, translated into wood and a brass handle instead of a person. The jacket hangs on its hook by the door where she left it, and from the chair she can see the shape of it in the dark. The photograph a flat weight inside cloth she isn't going to touch tonight. She doesn't need to. Carried it long enough to know its shape without looking, and knowing is enough. The watching place has held things before. 15 years of things, some of them heavier than most operatives ever carry in a career, and she has always found the shape that lets her hold them, has never once, until now, run out of room. What's different tonight isn't the weight. She's carried worse weight than this and slept anyway, more than once, more than she'd ever admit to anyone who asked. What's different is the structure. 3 claims on the same object, each one whole, each one incompatible with the other 2, pressing against each other in a configuration that has no stable position to settle into, no arrangement where all 3 sit quietly at once. She's held contradictions before, never one that couldn't, eventually, resolve itself into a decision she was capable of making alone. At some point past midnight, she thinks, with no more warning than the radio memory gave her in the car. of the dry cleaning she still needs to pick up on M Street, the ticket gone soft in whatever coat pocket she left it in. And the thought sits next to the 3 claims without any sense of proportion at all, ordinary and enormous, occupying the same small room in her head at the same time. She doesn't move from the chair for a long time. The lamp stays on. Outside, the building settles the way old buildings do at night, small ticks and creaks that mean nothing and that she catalogs anyway, an old habit, the same one that's kept her alive for 15 years now, turned on a room that doesn't need watching. Go. Be present. Recover what being present gives you. Carry it back. The echo's words don't change shape no matter how many times she turns them over. 4 short instructions that meant one thing 5 days ago and mean something heavier now, that a second voice has laid its own claim across the same ground. She still doesn't know what carrying it back would look like, practically, on whatever night it finally comes. Less known now than this morning about how any of this ends, and that feels less like a loss than an admission she's been circling for 3 months without letting herself land on it. Somewhere past midnight, the sprinkler outside finally shuts off, and the silence that comes after it is a different silence than the one it replaces, and she doesn't notice exactly when that happens, only that at some point it has. She sat with the weight of 3 things that could not all be honored, and she did not sleep.